Stories and Art live from the Norton Museum of Art in West Palm Beach, Florida. My name is Rebecca Smeckle. I'm here from EdTech. Joining us today are two very special ladies, Meredith and Veronica from the Norton Museum of Art. They're going to be walking us through a beautiful work of art today. Before we get started, a couple of the housekeeping notice. We do have moderators in our chat. We have moderators in both English and Spanish today because this session is dual language. Please use appropriate language in the chat so our Nightbot doesn't have to delete any of your comments. I know that you're going to have a great time participating today. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring Meredith and Veronica up. They are live at the Norton Museum of Art, and they have a great session for you here today.
Thank you, Rebecca. We're really excited to be here. And my name's Meredith, and we are really excited to also be offering the Stories in Art Live program as part of Literacy Week in collaboration with the School District of Palm Beach County. As Rebecca mentioned, this is a program that will be dual language, so I'm going to be giving the English portion, and I'm live from the galleries, and my colleague Veronica is upstairs in the Norton offices, and she'll be leading the portion in Spanish.
Hola, bienvenidos al Museo de Arte de Norton. Mi nombre es Veronica Hatch. Estoy muy contenta de estar ofreciendo historias de arte en vivo, como parte de la semana de alfabetización en colaboración con el Distrito Escolar del Condado de Palm Beach. Este es un tour, como se podrán haber dado cuenta, como Rebecca y Meredith mencionaron, en inglés y en español. Meredith está en vivo desde las galerías, desde la exposición del artista. Yo estoy aquí arriba en las oficinas. Les ofrecemos el programa en estos dos idiomas el día de hoy.
This tour is all about participation today. We'll be looking at one work of art for about 30 minutes, and we're going to ask you to see, think, and wonder. You can write responses or your observations in the chat in English or in Spanish. We shout out to Immaculata, who is translating for us in Spanish in the chat. You can also, if you have a piece of paper in front of you and feel more comfortable responding to questions just by writing, you can do that as well. But make sure you do have a piece of paper and a pencil with you for the end of this experience because we're going to do a quick activity.
Así es. Este tour, lo más importante en este tour es la participación de ustedes. Así que les pedimos que por favor tomen tres simples pasos que son ver, usar tus ojos para observar. Vamos a usar nuestra cabeza para pensar en lo que estamos viendo y después les vamos a pedir que extiendan eso haciendo más preguntas y creando curiosidades acerca de lo que están viendo. Estas preguntas las pueden responder en el chat o les pedimos también que tengan un pedazo de papel y lápiz listo, por si acaso no quieran compartir en el chat, lo puedan escribir. Queremos agradecer a Inmaculada por estar aquí y ayudarnos en el chat.
At the Norton Museum of Art, we collect all different types of objects, from Chinese objects, ancient Chinese objects, to sculptures that you can walk all the way around, to photography, to painting. And today we are in a special exhibition by an artist named María Berrío called Waiting for the Night to Bloom.
Aquí en el museo, como dice el nombre, ¿verdad?, de arte, es un museo donde coleccionamos diferentes tipos de obras, desde pinturas, esculturas, fotografía, hasta objetos chinos antiguos. En este día vamos a estar viendo y observando una obra de arte de una artista colombiana llamada María Berrío. Esta exposición está en vivo en el Norton hasta mayo 9.
So, we are going to examine how Berrío uses the elements of art, which I'm sure if you've been in an art class, you know a lot about. Vocab words such as line, shape, color, space, texture. We're also going to look at the principles of design, which if you've been in a design class or an art class, you might have learned about these as well, such as balance, emphasis, proportion, and contrast. So we're going to think about the elements of art and the principles of designs when we're seeing to think about how Berrío uses these things to create a story about her background and her identity.
En esta exposición, Esperando mientras la noche florece, les vamos a pedir que examinemos cómo Berrío utiliza los diferentes elementos del arte, ¿verdad? Como la forma, el color, el espacio y la textura, y los principios de diseño, que estoy seguro que ustedes lo están ya aprendiendo o lo saben en la escuela, como el equilibrio, énfasis, forma, proporción, contraste, para crear una historia acerca de sus experiencias y su propia identidad.
So, we've both said the word identity. When we say the word identity, what comes to mind? And you can answer in the chat in English or Spanish. So, when we say the word identity, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
So Meredith está preguntándonos la primera pregunta, ¿verdad? Que cuando hemos hablado de María Berrío y les decimos la palabra identidad, que es parte del vocabulario, ¿verdad? ¿Qué piensas cuando escuchas la palabra identidad? ¿Qué se te viene a la mente?
So, we'll just wait for a couple of responses. And I'm looking at the chat now. When we say identity, what comes to mind?
And Meredith, I just want to say that we have kids and participation from back, from Lake Worth High. I just wanted to say hi to everybody.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. It's so good to see you. It's like you're actually in the Norton. How cool. So, while we're waiting for some responses in the chat, Veronica, what's a big part of your identity?
I think when I relate, to actually looking at this exhibition in particular, part of my identity, obviously, it's first and foremost being a mom, but coming from a different country and growing on a different, country than the United States. So those two main things make part of my identity.
And you and Berrío have a connection, and we'll talk about that more when we get to the work of art.
I can't wait to talk about
A
that.
big part of my identity is also being a mom as well, but also my family and that I'm a Texan. Somebody says that identity to me is who I am as a person. Yeah, so identity, right, is who we are, but there's different parts that make up our identity. So Veronica and I said that we're both moms. She has twins and I have a little baby, and that's a big part of our identity. But also her background as an immigrant and where she comes from and now where she lives in the United States is a big part of her identity too. Somebody said it's represents me as an individual and as a member of multiple groups.
Así es, representa quién soy yo como a una persona individual y qué parte de diferentes grupos pertenezco a diferentes grupos. Así es. Meredith, another thing. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go.
I just wanted to say another thing that also, besides like things that we do right around us, like either a hobby or a sport or something that we might. So you want to share that, that could be also an idea.
Yeah, so like a passion that we have. So we kind of have an outward identity, and our identity, as Becky mentioned, our identity changes depending on what groups we might be with as well. But we also have an inward identity that makes us who we are, like where you're from or where your family is from. So identity pulls from multiple different parts to create who you are.
Yeah, and then someone said, and then I'll repeat in Spanish, it is about your roots, culture, traditions, your home, your family. So just what we were saying. Gracias, Inmaculada. Es acerca de tus raíces, tu cultura, tus tradiciones, tu casa y tu familia.
Great. And I'm seeing so many great responses in the chat, and thank you for featuring them up on here as well. We're not going to be able to get to all of the responses when we're doing our questioning, only because we have 30 minutes. But what's most important is that you all are seeing each other's responses. So keep on responding in the chat. It's really awesome to see you interacting.
Así es. Y mientras Meredith se enfoca en la obra, quería decirles que pueden seguir respondiendo. No vamos a poder responder a todas sus respuestas en el chat. Trataremos, pero lo importante también es que puedan ver los comentarios de una y otra persona, ¿verdad?
So let's head to the work of art. Are you ready, Veronica?
Yes, I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Meredith nos está invitando en este momento a ver a la obra de arte y vamos hasta que se posicione enfrente de la obra. She's turning around. She's actually handling the card. So we give kudos to Meredith being in the galleries, and she's right there.
First try. I did it.
Wow, wonderful. Estamos enfrente de la obra. Vamos a empezar.
So I'm behind the cart that we use that has a webcam on it to look at the work of art. So I just want to be off camera so that you can focus on the work of art.
Así es, vamos a estar las dos fuera de cámara mientras ustedes se enfocan directamente en la obra de arte porque es lo que queremos que observen.
Okay, so we talked about see, thank, wonder, and now it's time to see. So I challenge you to take a look at this work of art for a full 30 seconds. Look. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Veronica.
Hablamos de ver, pensar y de preguntar, ¿verdad? En este momento es el momento que los invitamos a ver y observar la obra.
Look up, down, both sides of the work of art, and challenge yourself to really move all around the painting. So when you think you've seen everything, challenge yourself to see something new.
Ahora este es el momento de ver. Te retamos a echar un vistazo a toda esta obra por 30 segundos. Mira hacia arriba, hacia abajo, a ambos lados. Cuando creas que lo has visto todo, desafíate a encontrar algo nuevo.
And I'm already seeing some great responses come into the chat. So we'll take a couple more seconds just to look. We never really have time to slow down and just see something. We're always moving. So this is a great opportunity to take some breaths and just look.
I agree. Meredith nos está diciendo que siempre estamos corriendo y no tomamos tiempo realmente de parar y observar. Y en este momento los estamos invitando a hacer eso por unos segundos más.
So I'm already seeing in the chat that somebody wrote that they love this. So we'd love to hear more responses. What do you notice about the setting? So based on what you see, what do you notice about the setting, where this story takes place?
La primera pregunta, ¿verdad? Es ¿qué vemos? ¿Qué están viendo en la escena que está frente a ustedes?
And we'll wait for a couple of responses to come into the chat.
Nos encantaría oír sus comentarios. Hay tanto que ver.
There's a lot to see in this setting, right, Veronica?
Every time I look at this work of art, Meredith, it's all new again.
I love it.
Because there's so much to see, like you mentioned.
That's what I love about art. Veronica, you noticed, you always notice one thing when you first look at this work of art.
Yes, I do. Well, talking about going back to what we said helps you look at work of art, right? Thinking about the elements of art. So I always focus on the color.
Yeah, so in this setting, there seems to be a lot of color. And I'm noticing in this setting, Veronica, there's one color that pops out to me, which is the black of these street lamps over here. So this setting is, I'm already getting an idea of the story just based on, I'm trying to move my finger. There we go. I'm already getting an idea of this story based on the setting. And I'm seeing these like really interesting and intricate lamp hanging off of a building, and they're deep black. So I always go to those first.
I agree. Meredith está diciendo que lo primero que vemos, parte de los elementos de arte que son los que nos ayudan a ver las obras y observar, ¿verdad? Uno de estos elementos es el color. Y si vemos las lámparas que están colgando desde estas estructuras, el color resalta, ¿verdad? Y es el color negro.
And somebody in the chat also recognized that too. Oh, and somebody said, is it an art gallery? Perhaps.
They're saying they feel like they're in the galleries and how, because it looks so real, right?
Wow. Okay, and someone says it reminds me of a trip to Mexico where I saw clotheslines between buildings, and she's noticing that they're really colorful and they're in the space. So we're noticing two things here. We notice that it looks like it's a country in Latin America, reminds somebody of Mexico. with these lamps, and we also see the clothes between the buildings. And we're noticing an element of art here, right? We notice these really vibrant colors in between the buildings. And we're also noticing another element of art. We're noticing these lines, how the artist is using lines to create the setting, to show us these clothes and these lamps.
Así es. El comentario de Becky que nos está comentando, ¿verdad? Diciéndonos que parece que estamos en un setting que le recuerda a México, tal vez, donde hay ropa y líneas, ¿verdad? Las líneas de ropa, pero que el artista crea líneas, ¿verdad? Para llevar la atención a ese lugar. Y edificios con muchos colores y compartiendo un mismo espacio. Muchas gracias por su comentario. Así es, compartiendo un mismo espacio.
And you're talking about space, Veronica. It's also very crowded space, right? We're kind of in between these two, what look like apartment buildings. We have a bunch of clothes. Becky noticed that we even have these two people squished at the bottom. So this artist is creating kind of a very tight space and layering these colors on top of one another.
Así es. Yeah, exactly, Meredith. All that, those cues that the artist is giving us, the clues. Están viendo exactamente como dos espacios conviven que son diferentes, ¿verdad?
Okay, so we've noticed about the setting, we've noticed emphasis, which is a principle of design. We've noticed she's emphasizing some areas like the lamppost here and the colorful clothes. We've noticed this setting almost looks like it's somewhere in Latin America, and telling us that because of the clothes, and also you see sometimes this ironwork, these types of ironwork and balconies in Latin America.
Meredith, before I move on, I
Yeah.
wanted to share before I kind of say it in Spanish, I wanted to share, Tasha said something very important too. So now we have buildings, we're talking about people, we're talking about all those objects, but also about the sky and the clouds, el cielo y las nubes, aparte de todo lo demás que ya hemos observado, los edificios, las personas, la ropa, con todos esos elementos de arte, ¿verdad? Que nos guían el ojo a observar estos objetos.
Wow, this is a great observation about the skies and clouds. And I'm going to zoom in. I'm noticing other people are talking about the people, and we're not ignoring you, but I want to talk about the people in just a second. So I promise we'll have some time to talk about those characters and the people as well. So we have emphasis through some of these colors, and we also have contrast, right? These principles of design, we have a contrast between, which is another vocabulary word. We have a contrast between the background, this what looks like a sky with the white and the blue and these pattern colorful clothing. We are going to ask you, what materials do you think this artist, María Berrío, what materials do you think she uses in her work of art? So yeah, take a look at the colors and the patterns. Look closely, and let us know in the chat what materials do you think she uses for her work of art.
Así es, Meredith nos ha llevado, está haciendo un close-up, ¿verdad? Nos está llevando en detalle a ver esta obra y nos está haciendo una pregunta acerca de esos colores y materiales. ¿Qué crees tú? ¿Qué colores usa y qué materiales usa María Berrío, ¿verdad? Para crear esta escena. I see so much, Meredith. Every time something new.
Every time nuevo. It's amazing because when you zoom in, you see really the artist hand and all of these details. Any guesses about what material she might be using?
And we are going to go back soon to all those wonderful observations about the space and the story. But we are focusing right now. Parece, it looks like real cloth, right?
And Veronica, please keep these comments in mind about the people and the story and what's happening in the space, because you're right, we will definitely be using those again. It almost looks like real cloth. Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe you guessed this. I agree. It looks like swaths of
Ah,
fabric.
ujú.
Wow, these are really wonderful observations. And you're right that it does look like real cloth. It's all papers. And Maria Berrío collects papers from all over the world. And in fact, maybe you notice some of these patterns remind you of different countries. She takes these papers and she also makes papers of her own,
Papel.
and she puts them together in a collage. So a collage means that you're taking different parts, different materials, and putting them together to create a work of art. And look at all of these wonderful papers she's put together.
So that is Meredith. Someone said that it looks like paper from a magazine. Voy a agregar la palabra del vocabulario, ¿verdad? Collage, porque sí, es verdad. Ustedes nos han dado muchas ideas de lo que esto puede ser. Parece tela de verdad, colgada, con todos estos patrones. Y está hecho de papel, ¿verdad? Eso nos ayuda cuando hacemos el zoom, nos ayuda a ver realmente que está hecho. Hay alguien dice que de madera, wood, maybe.
It does
El
almost have a
magazine,
material of wood.
revista. Ujú.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And paper's made out of wood. So you have a really keen observation. And she is in some of the portions that we'll look at in just a minute. With the character, she's also is using magazine clippings to get some of this texture, which is another vocabulary word. She's using different types of paper to give us this texture to create her work of art.
Meredith, this could be a good opportunity just as we talk about the collage itself and, and her process and María Berrio's process, but maybe you can zoom out just so we can provide a scale of the work, right? If we're focusing on
Absolutely.
her process.
And I'm going to,
Meredith, go ahead.
no, you go ahead in Spanish first, Veronica.
Sí, quería decirles, Meredith va a tratar de pararse al frente de la obra, porque hablando del collage y del proceso de esta artista, es muy importante darnos cuenta de la escala, el tamaño de la obra, ¿verdad? Para que vean cómo María trabaja con diferentes tipos de papeles de diferentes partes del mundo y es tan meticuloso su trabajo, ¿verdad? Tan intricate, es tan delicado y crea esta obra tan grande. Vamos a ver a Meredith al frente de la obra. Meredith.
And I also just want to say, Veronica, as I'm going to stand in front of this work of art so that you can see the scale, which means the size of the work of art. And that will tell you a little more about her process. But I also want to mention that when they said it looks like cloth, I thought that was interesting because Maria Berrío herself is very interested in clothing and patterns within clothing and different types of clothing. And she herself wears a lot of pattern clothes. So this is also, I think, showing a little bit of her identity through her love for multiple patterns and colorful clothing.
And that is how she dresses. We got to meet her, right? And see many pictures. But there you go, Meredith. Es parte de su identidad. Es como ella se viste. So, vestirse, la ropa que ella se pone es parte también de la identidad de María Berrío. Oh, wow, Meredith. I always see, it's so big.
It's as big as me, believe it or not. So think about the time it would have taken for her to cut all of these papers and puts them together to create the story.
Meredith, and can you tell us that she calls these paintings, right, not collages?
Yeah, you're right, Veronica. She her process is actually she takes a large canvas, so this is stretched canvas, and she draws on the canvas to try to figure out her shapes and her forms where they will go. Then she layers the paper on top of the works of art, and you'll notice the paper is very layered and creates that texture. And then she also paints on the works of art as well, which we'll see a little bit more of in the characters. And I'm going to head to the characters now.
Así es. Meredith está relatando acerca del proceso. María crea unos sketches, unos dibujos en la obra primero y después aplica el papel, ¿verdad? Y ella le dice pinturas y no se refiere a ellos como collage, porque muchas veces pinta individualmente los papeles para crear esta obra tan magnífica, ¿no? Y tan grande.
I think we lost the work of art. So if you want to pull back up the work of art, there we go. Okay. Although I love seeing Veronica's face. We do want to have time to think. So we've done our seeing portion. Now it's time to think. So if you had to tell a story about these two figures based on what you see, who do you think they are?
Ahora que hemos pasado la parte de ver, Meredith nos está invitando a pensar un poco más. Si tuvieras que contar una historia sobre estas dos figuras, basada en lo que ves, ¿quién crees que estas figuras son?
So, who might these characters be? And you can write in the chat in English or in Spanish.
I can think of so many stories, Meredith, and so many
No,
conversations, but
that's what I love about art, Veronica, is that we can also use art as inspiration to either write or come up with our own stories. So there's endless possibilities to what the work of art could be about.
and we'll wait just a few seconds. Vamos a esperar un poco más a ver si alguien quiere comentar acerca de estas personajes, figuras. Es parte también de nuestro vocabulario. It's part of our vocabulary, the figures. When talking about art, we refer to those as figure.
And Veronica, I'm going to ask you to point out some ideas about what you're seeing. So maybe that will help people kind of create these stories. Yeah, Ty said they seem very, very familiar with each other. So one is lying on the other one sleeping. So they're clearly not strangers. They seem very comfortable with each other.
Así es, Tai, gracias por tu comentario. Está diciendo que es algo que parece muy familiar, ¿verdad? Algo muy cómodo para estas dos personas, estas figuras que están entrelazadas la una con la otra, ¿verdad? Si no conocieras a esa persona, tal vez no te sentirías tan cómodo de estar acostada en la barriga de esa persona. Entonces nos da una idea de qué tan familiar son.
Absolutely. I'm also noticing something a little strange about this, Veronica. There's not just the two characters, the two figures together, as we would call it in art, figures, but there's also some other figures here too.
Así es, otros personajes, ¿verdad? Right, Meredith? Other characters that pop up in this wonderful story by María Berrío.
So many birds. One bird I never noticed upon first glance is this beautiful hummingbird. And someone said magazine earlier, she's using some pre-made images like these feathers to create these birds. And I'm even noticing she's using not just paper, but she's using, sorry, it's focusing.
Yeah,
She's using some almost looks like rhinestones to put crowns on their heads.
That's right, Meredith. Sí, Meredith nos está guiando ahora con nuestros ojos a ver más detalles de la obra, de la parte de abajo, ¿verdad? Porque esta es una obra tan grande, una obra con tantas partes, pero se enfocó en el colibrí, así como nos acercamos. Y aparte del colibrí, ¿qué más ven alrededor? Tenemos estas dos figuras, ahora vemos diferentes tipos de pájaros, también donde crea la textura con, alguien mencionó anteriormente, con revistas, sí, partes que se usan de revistas. ¿Qué otras cosas en esta posición abajo ven que notan, aparte de los pájaros y las personas?
So as we continue to look and find things that we notice, we want you to look at the subject's poses. We noticed Ty said that they seem very relaxed and they seem to know each other. So think about their pose. And does that give you any clues to where you think they are? Where do you think they are in this story and why? We also noticed that somebody said it might be Latin America and Mexico. What type of setting are they in?
I want to just go back quickly to someone else because we relate this to the artist background and heritage, right?
Please
and cultural
do.
heritage. But also someone mentioned that things can remind you of different places. And someone mentioned that this reminds them of Venice. Maybe perhaps a canal in Venice. Alguien estaba mencionando que esto les recuerda a otra parte muy diferente, tal vez en Italia, en Venice. Pero regresando a la pregunta, observa cómo están posando estos sujetos, ¿verdad? Y su entorno. ¿Dónde creen que están?
Yeah, you're right. These buildings and the ironwork and the way that people are hanging clothes are very much like Venice. And the blues even remind me of water that you might see in Venice as well.
You're right, Meredith.
What I noticed, Veronica, that's a little interesting too, is we didn't talk yet about the flowers surrounding these people and that they're wearing flower crowns. So I'm thinking about their pose. They seem very relaxed to be in the middle of this, what I assume is a city. And yet they have flowers growing all around them and they're laying with the birds.
Yeah, like that you point out the setting, Meredith, because in another session we had someone commented about the sprouting twigs and flowers that look so odd in the middle of the street, right? So it's these two worlds, son estos dos mundos diferentes, ¿verdad? De la vida urbana, otra parte de vocabulario, ¿no? La vida de la ciudad y aparte la vida de estas flores en la naturaleza, ¿no?
Someone says they're taking a nap, two friends taking a nap, and there's some very big birds. So we're noticing again that they seem comfortable with each other. They seem to be friends, and they are surrounded by birds, almost like what is that? Snow White in the Seven Dwarfs. They seem to be very comfortable with these birds and each other.
Así es, y viendo también, pensando en las figuras y los pájaros, hablando también acerca del tamaño, ¿verdad? The scale of the bird, hablando de qué grande comparado a estas dos personas que tal vez nos recuerdan a diferentes historias relatadas a un cuento tal vez que sea familiar, ¿verdad?
This is so fun. Yeah, I would also be scared of being birds that big. Not a huge fan of birds. I totally hear you on that one. Well,
And these
let
seem
us
to be parakeets, right, Meredith? These seem to be
Oh,
parakeets.
yeah, I thought that the bigger birds kind of look like parakeets or parrots, like the parakeets you might see, I see in downtown West Palm Beach. So definitely she's referring to a lot of different types of birds here.
This is a perfect way to talk, to know a little more about the artist, ¿verdad? Vamos ahora
Absolutely.
a hablar un poquito más acerca del artista.
So this is a work of art by an artist that we've been talking about, María Berrío, and María Berrío is from Colombia. And she grew up until she was 18 and then she moved to America to go to school and she's still living in Brooklyn today. She grew up in Bogota, Colombia. And Bogota is a really big, crowded city. And back when she lived there, there was also a lot of violence. So think about she's living in this crowded city with her family. There's a lot of violence. So she was very insular. She was mainly staying with her family in their home. And her getaway on the weekends was to go to a family farm. So she has a big connection to nature and always incorporates this kind of nature into her works of art.
Así es, hablando un poco más antes de terminar acerca del artista María Berrío, ella es una artista colombiana que creció en Bogotá, que es una ciudad grande, ¿verdad?, de Colombia, pero su familia le gustaba mucho poder experimentar la diferencia de la vida, de salir de la vida citadina y ir a la naturaleza para explorar afuera de Bogotá. Así es como creció ella, influenciada con todas estas observaciones de la flora y la fauna acerca fuera de la ciudad. Ella creció en Bogotá, pero vino a vivir a los Estados Unidos cuando tenía 18 años. Su familia regresó y ella se quedó aquí estudiando diseño en una escuela en Nueva York. Y vive ahora y trabaja en su estudio en Brooklyn.
So if you're thinking about this story and what kind of story she's creating. We have this urban setting, which is one of our vocabulary words. We have an urban setting, but we also have a rural setting or something in nature. So it's kind of a juxtaposition, right? It's strange that these people seem to be lying in the street, cramped in the middle of the buildings in this city. And so she creates kind of this fantasy world in her stories. She's taking from her real life, her love of nature, her where she grew up in the city, and she often puts these things together. She is very interested in a genre of literature called magic or magical realism. Think of Gabriel
García
Garcia
Márquez.
Marquez,
Ujú.
who is a very famous artist who she's inspired by, as among other artists who are very interested in magical realism. And they create kind of a dreamlike fantasy world. So in her works of art, they're very fantastical and insert that magical realism and fantasy into her works. And we talked about the relationship between the two people. She often includes herself, but also family and friends. And she has many siblings that she also includes in her work. So she's really drawing from her identity and her life, but also what she loves into her stories.
Así es, María Berrío no solamente está influenciada por estas cosas que vio creciendo en Bogotá y después viniendo a vivir acá a los Estados Unidos, pero también una parte que la influenció mucho es la poesía y la literatura de Latinoamérica, ¿verdad? Leyendo mucho acerca de esta muy prominente em, em, historia de la literatura, que es el realismo mágico, como Gabriel García Márquez o Lorca, y son partes solamente de una parte pequeña de la otra grande identidad que hace que María Berrío cree estas obras uniendo todas estos gustos y estas curiosidades que ella tiene acerca de las cosas que la rodean.
So now it's time for us to go, sadly, but we want to leave you with one last task and thing to do. Now it's time to wonder. Now that you know what you know about Maria Berrío and her identity as an immigrant, an artist, a Colombian, an American, a lover of magical realism, I want you to name one thing you see in this picture that relates to Maria Berrío's identity. And you can write it in the chat. You can write it down in front of you. You might see even more than one thing, and you can write multiple things down. But what's at least one thing that you see in this painting that relates to Maria Berrío's identity?
Sabiendo ahora lo que sabes de María Berrío y de su identidad como inmigrante, artista, colombiana, americana, amante del realismo mágico, ¿nos pudieras dar el nombre, nos pudieras decir algo acerca de esta imagen? ¿Qué te recuerda tal vez de María Berrío, que te puede decir cualquier de estos temas que hemos tomado? ¿No lo puedes escribir aparte o lo puedes compartir en el chat después de la sesión?
And as you all think of your answers, we just want to say goodbye to you. I hope that you think about, too, your own identity as a person and how it relates to Maria Berrío, perhaps. You can even write down your own words that relate to your identity if you'd like to reflect on yourself and what makes you you. Veronica, I know, has some great connections that she can tell you about to this work of art. And I love that art can connect you to your identity and connect you to yourself and your family and your community. So we want to just thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you to the Ed Tech team at the school district, the dual language literacy and arts team. We really appreciate your help. If you'd like to visit the Norton in person, we are open on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, but you can also visit us online at norton.org. And we even have an in-person conversation online with Maria Berrío in this gallery. So if you'd like to see what she looks like and learn more about her work, you can do so on our YouTube page.
Sí, gracias por visitarnos, estamos muy contentos, espero hayan disfrutado esta sesión con el Norton. Queremos agradecer especialmente al Departamento de Tecnología del Distrito y el Distrito Escolar del Condado de Palm Beach por esta oportunidad. Para aprender más acerca de nuestra colección, incluyendo las 5 colecciones y más acerca de María Berrío, los invitamos a que vayan a norton.org, donde pueden conseguir más información, incluyendo una charla de María Berrío vivo desde las galerías.
Thank you all so much. We had fun. Bye.
Gracias. Bye. Hasta luego.
Bye.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Meredith. Always great to see you and collaborate with you. From everyone here on the EdTech team, we thank you for joining us. This session is recorded, so it will be live on our YouTube channel as well as linked on our edtechtraining.palmbeachschools.org email or our website, excuse me. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day.